In the village of Zango, there lived a woman named Salima. Her life was as barren as the dusty earth beneath her feet. Her clothes were torn rags, barely holding together, and her heart felt like a hollow shell. The roof of her home leaked when it rained, and the cold winds slipped through the cracks in the walls, mocking her every misfortune. Salima had no bed to sleep in. She curled up on the hard, cold floor each night, shivering like a hungry cat. Every day, she prayed for a better life. Yet, every morning greeted her with the same struggle. She worked tirelessly, fetching water for the villagers, washing their clothes, laboring in their fields, but no matter how much effort she put forth, her hands always returned empty. It was as if the world had turned its back on her. Her friends, the women she grew up with, were all married, living comfortably with their families. They wore fine clothes, their children running around them, laughing joyously. But Salima had no husband, no children, no one to call her own. The villagers whispered behind her back, "She's cursed," they said, "born with bad luck." Even the men kept their distance, afraid her misfortune would rub off on them. Salima's life felt like a never-ending tale of sorrow. She moved through the village like a shadow, unnoticed, unloved, and unwanted. Yet, despite the despair, she clung to the faint hope that one day, the sun would shine brighter on her life. That day had not come, not yet. One scorching afternoon, Salima went to the river, carrying a bundle of tattered clothes to wash. The sun beat down mercilessly, and the river sparkled like molten silver. She knelt by the water, scrubbing the rags with hands as rough as the village roads. The sound of rushing water was the only comfort she had. As she worked, she heard footsteps behind her. Her heart skipped a beat, and she turned quickly, fear rising in her chest. Standing tall and proud before her was a woman whose presence seemed to command the air around her. She wore clothes so fine they seemed fit for a queen, her skin glowing, her jewelry sparkling. Her smile was sharp, almost predatory. "Good day," the woman said, her voice smooth as honey. Salima blinked in confusion, unsure if she was dreaming. "Good day, ma'am," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. The woman stepped closer. "My name is Kai," she said, her eyes glinting with something unreadable. "I've been watching you, Salima. I know your struggles." Salima's eyes widened. How did this stranger know her name? Kai smiled, as if reading her thoughts. "I have a business for you, one that will change your life. It's simple. Do as I say, and you'll never be poor again." Salima's mind raced, questions tumbling over each other. What kind of business? What did this woman want from her? Kai reached into her bag and pulled out a bundle of crisp, new banknotes. "You will collect used panties from the villagers," she said, handing the money to Salima. "Bring me as many as you can. For every load, I will pay you handsomely." Salima's jaw dropped. "Panties?" she asked, her voice thick with confusion. "Yes," Kai said firmly. "Don't ask questions. Do as I say, and you will never want for anything again." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Salima standing by the river, clutching the money in her hands. Salima's mind was clouded with questions. What kind of business was this? Why panties? She didn't understand, but the weight of the money in her hands felt real, like a promise. For the first time in her life, hope stirred in her chest. That night, Salima lay awake, her mind racing. She had a plan. The villagers would be suspicious if she asked only for panties, so she decided to make her trade appear more ordinary. With the money Kai had given her, Salima bought several colorful buckets and bowls in the market, bright and shiny, each one gleaming in the morning sun. The next day, she knocked on the first door. An old woman answered, narrowing her eyes. "What do you want?" she asked. Good morning, Mama, Salima greeted, holding up a bright blue bucket. I'm exchanging these for any old clothes, shoes, or even panties you don't need. The old woman grunted. Old clothes, shoes, panties. What kind of business is this? It's for a new venture, Salima said smoothly. If you have anything you don't need, I'll trade you for this fine bucket. The old woman's eyes lit up at the sight of the bucket. Without hesitation, she disappeared inside and returned with a pile of old clothes, shoes, and, at the very top, a few worn-out panties. Salima smiled. Thank you, Mama, she said, exchanging the bucket for the goods. At every house, it was the same. The villagers eagerly handed over their unwanted items in exchange for the shiny new bowls and buckets. By the end of the day, Salima's sack was full, overflowing with clothes, shoes, and most importantly, panties. That night, she sorted through her collection, carefully setting aside the panties in a special sack. The other clothes and shoes, she burned in a hidden spot near the river. The flames crackled, devouring the evidence as Salima watched, her face glowing in the firelight. The next day, she delivered the sack of panties to Kai by the river. Kai opened the sack with a sharp smile. Well done, she said, her voice smooth as silk. She handed Salima a thick bundle of money. Keep going, Salima, she said, her eyes gleaming with approval. Your life is about to change. And so, Salima's trade continued. Each day, the village saw her with new buckets and bowls, exchanging them for old clothes, shoes, and panties. As word spread, more and more villagers eagerly lined up to trade their unwanted items for the shining goods Salima offered. Her success grew, and the once poor woman was transformed. She repaired her hut, replaced the leaky roof, and bought new clothes, bright and colorful, just like the women she had once envied. For the first time in her life, Salima could eat her fill. No more begging or struggling, her days of hunger were over. The villagers whispered among themselves. Look at Salima, they said. She's no longer the poor woman we once knew. Maybe her business is truly blessed. But while her days were filled with trade and laughter, Salima's heart carried a darker secret. Every night, after the village had fallen silent, Salima would quietly gather her sacks of panties. Like a shadow, she would slip through the narrow paths, heading toward the river to meet Kentucky. There, they exchanged only a few words. Kai would take the sack of panties and hand over the money. No one knew of these nightly meetings. To the villagers, Salima's success was a tale of hard work and persistence, but in the dark, a much darker truth was unfolding. Soon, Salima's trade spread to neighboring villages. Her buckets and bowls became the talk of the region. Villagers eagerly awaited her next visit, excited to exchange their old things for her fine goods. But one woman, Tinu, had begun to notice something strange. Every night, when the village was quiet, Salima would leave her hut with a heavy sack, disappearing into the darkness. Curiosity gnawed at Tinu, and one night, she followed Salima, keeping her distance as Salima made her way to the river. There, hidden behind the tall grass, Tinu watched in shock as she saw Kai, the woman who had brought Salima so much wealth. The rich woman was seated by the riverbank, surrounded by candles that flickered in a perfect circle. She began to chant, her voice low and rhythmic. Tinu's heart raced as she watched Kai pull the panties from the sack, and in an instant, they vanished into thin air, leaving behind an eerie glow. Tinu's breath caught in her throat, and the sound of Kai's strange laughter sent chills down her spine. Terrified, she retreated into the darkness, her mind racing with fear and confusion. What had she just witnessed? Who was Kai? And what was she doing with the villagers' panties? The next day, Tinu could bear the weight of her knowledge no longer. She rushed to the village elders, her words tumbling over each other as she told them what she had seen. The elders listened in stunned silence before deciding they must confront Salima. The village bell rang, calling the people together. The elders stood before Salima, their faces grim. "Salima," the head elder said, "Tinu has brought us a troubling report. She says she followed you to the river last night and saw things that concern the safety of our village." "What is this business of panties?" Salima's heart sank. She trembled before the villagers, her shame threatening to swallow her whole. With a voice barely above a whisper, she finally spoke. I cannot explain. I took an oath. If I speak, I will go mad or die." The villagers gasped. The head elder turned to the chief priest, who stepped forward with a stern expression. He raised his staff and began chanting. The air around them grew heavy with the scent of incense, and the ground trembled as if the village itself was awakening from a long slumber. The chief priest held up a small charm, and the ground beneath Salima's feet began to crack open. From the darkness below, a figure emerged, a creature that seemed to be made of shadows and smoke. Kai's voice echoed in the air as she spoke from the creature's mouth. "You have betrayed us, Salima," she hissed. "I gave you riches, but your soul belongs to me now." But the villagers, united in their faith and strength, had prepared. Together, they cast a spell that bound Kai in the earth, trapping her forever. With Kai's dark power defeated, Salima was free. But the weight of what she had done, the lives she had destroyed, hung heavily on her heart. She left the village that night, leaving behind the life she had built on a lie. As dawn broke, Tinu stood by the river, watching the mist lift from the water. She knew that the villagers had been saved, but at a terrible cost. The curse was broken, but only just. The damage had been done. Salima's name was never spoken again in Zango, but Tinu became a hero. She took on the mantle of the village's protector, ensuring that the villagers would never again fall prey to such darkness. And as for Salima, she disappeared into the world beyond, haunted by her choices but free at last.